The White Wolf walked around the city of Argborn, the hideout belonging to Conquest. The difference between the populations was night and day. The rich folk in their fancy medieval homes arrogant as ever, wasting food and enjoying the sinful temptations Conquest offered them, whereas the villagers had folk ruffling through garbage bins to find a piece of bread just to subside their rumbling, hungry bellies. The werewolf, while walking towards a quiet rural village at night, looked towards the Grim Reaper.
"How do we find this monster that you speak of?"
The Grim walked towards a wooden notice board at the entrance of Oxdrift village. He saw a flyer made with parchment paper, removed it from the board, then showed it to Ragnar and said, "I'm sure it won't be that difficult." The notice said, "The Beast of Burdock Mountain strikes again." When morning arrived, Ragnar was hasteful in his movement to find out what the villagers saw or experienced last night. Death, however, stopped him. "Where do you think you're going, Werewolf?"
"I'm going to question the villagers and find out where the beast is, of course."
"And how would that work? Walk into the village and be like, 'Oh, excuse me, could you tell me where I can find the Beast of Burdock Mountain?' while your red eyes burn a hole through their soul?"
"I do not sound like that."
"Sure you don't." The handle of the scythe tapped the shoulder of the White Wolf as he gradually changed into a human again. While this had happened before, Ragnar was taken aback by the process. He had been a werewolf for so long that he felt emotional whenever he saw his human skin. Death donned him in village warrior clothing, making it seem like a stranger wandering by. He also gave him gold coins for food and beverages, but warned him not to spend all of it. Ragnar, in his human giant warrior form, asked the Reaper what disguise was he going to use. Death, however, had no plan of changing his appearance. He said, "I cannot be seen in that village. Last night was quiet, no one in sight, and I went unnoticed. But if my brother catches even a glimpse of me, this mission fails before we even begin. You search for the beast and I look for Conquest. However, the further I venture away, the werewolf will start to take over. When you feel an itch on your skin, that means my power is fading. Make sure no one sees you as a werewolf, Ragnar. Conquest will smell you a mile away." The Reaper then spun his scythe and disappeared. The warrior knight walked into the village of Oxdrift. He saw the village folk sobbing while the others stood there frozen in shock. Ragnar then noticed large and heavy footprints on the ground. This monster only had 4 toes. When he knelt down, he noticed there were thin strands of dark fur in them. Ragnar picked it up to his nose and snuffed. Sulfur. The heaviness of the sorrowful air loomed in the village, so strong that Ragnar felt its pressure pressing down on his shoulders. These folk were suffering with torment and grief. Then the villagers spotted him standing around and staring at them. They stood in awe, seeing a man so large, blonde hair into a ponytail and the village warrior clothing, unable to hide his muscles. Ragnar expected hostility. He expected these villagers to lash out at him from a foreigner wandering around in their home. Instead, despite the circumstances, he was met with warmth. There was an elderly woman that approached him and spoke kindly. She knew instantly that he wasn't from around here, though she never pried, rather pointed him towards the small wooden inn down the village. However, the woman did mention they never had much, certainly not a sufficient meal to fill a warrior so large, but she insisted the innkeeper would make something nevertheless. The old woman smiled warmly at Ragnar, then took her leave. He walked towards the Oxdrift Inn, opened the wooden door, and made his way to the counter. He was welcomed by an old black balding man with a long white beard. Ragnar looked at the man's clothes and knew just how much the village struggled. "Welcome, welcome, stranger. Forgive my tone of sadness," he said. "We've had a rough night, but what will you be having today?" Ragnar Leifson was going to say nothing for now until he felt the gold coins in his pocket. He remembered the Reaper telling him not to spend too much of it. However, Ragnar saw that as an annoying little prick. He placed 4 gold coins onto the wooden countertop as the old man's eyes lit up with surprise. "No thank you, kind man, you save your food for your village. However, my payment is for information instead." There was a flyer up on the notice board, the Beast of Burdock Mountain. "What can you tell me about this creature?" The old man kept the white napkin he used to wipe the countertop over his shoulder. He held onto the gold coins like it meant the world to him. His eyes filled with tears followed by snuffles, then placed the coins into his pocket like they were fragile. At that moment, the guards walked in. 4 men in strange armor that carried heavy weapons in their arms. Their foul stench of evil and malice could be smelled a mile away. They stole the beverages from the tables of existing customers, drank half, then threw the rest on the floor. They grabbed the food from the people enjoying a small yet good meal, then tossed it in the bin. The guards ignored Ragnar, walked towards the counter and slammed their hands against the wooden top. "Payment, you fool," they said. "Don't you know that you should have it ready? You either pay up or surrender the witch. We know she's hiding here. You can smell the poverty." Since the village harbored special people like mages, they had to pay tariffs to live there. The guards collected payment every week from the village of Oxrift. Since mages were also burned at the stake, the guards exploited this by extortion. The old man said, "But we just paid yesterday." His voice sounded defeated and filled with desperation. Then reluctantly, he reached for the gold coin inside his pocket. Ragnar Leifson jumped down from the wooden bar stool at the counter. He stood tall and strong, looking down on the guards and said, "No payment today." The captain guard responded, "And who is this oaf? Be warned, stranger, we do not ask you for your permit. Mind your own Ragnar grabbed the guard behind the neck and slammed his head onto the countertop. The impact was so hard the guard's nose buried inside his face. Just as the other guards could swing their heavy weapons, Ragnar moved like a shadow, snapping their necks despite their armor trying to protect them. He would have used their own weapons and sliced them apart from knowing the weak points in every armor that existed. But why dirty the innkeeper's wooden floor with blood? Just as they fell to the ground, Ragnar sat back on his wooden bar stool. Silence filled the inn while the villagers didn't move. Faint whispers began swarming in. "How the hell did he do that? Did you even see him move from his chair? He broke their necks. He broke their damn necks." Remarks of disbelief. Ragnar took out all the gold coins and gave it to the innkeeper, then told him to cook meals for the customers that had their food stolen. "Son," the old man said, "while I am grateful for what you have done, they will send more. They always do. Soon they will take our homes for refuge, they say. Yet their castles are allocated for punishing those who are different to them." Ragnar then replied, "No one will be taking your homes anymore. The city will soon be free of Conquest. However, are you able to cook and talk at the same time?" The old innkeeper gave a vague nod to Ragnar. "Good. Now tell me everything that you all know about the Beast of Burdock Mountain." Death had entered Purgatory, a dark, barren realm that lacked any color or vibrancy. There was thick smog that hovered over the place from burning fires and ash, with a foul stench that traveled in the cold and ominous breeze. Sounds echoed throughout the place. Roars, hisses, grunts, and heavy, thunderous footsteps from creatures that were taller than the trees. While seldomly would there be a few innocent souls trapped in this place, it was mostly occupied by the foulest of monsters and people that were kept around by angels for further use. If death had a say in natural law, then Purgatory would not exist. However, as much as the Reaper may outrank almost all beings in strength, natural law was not something created by the riders of the apocalypse, therefore his interference would be catastrophic. When the souls of good people were trapped in Purgatory from foul play by angels and demons, they were devoured within a few seconds. However, with that being said, and with the exception of his siblings, no person, monster, angel, or demon would ever be foolish enough to anger Death himself. As the Grim Reaper walked through whistling, every evil being in Purgatory bowed their heads while looking at the ground. But there were some monsters that picked their heads up and took a glimpse of Death. Maybe this was bravery or sheer stupidity, but the Reaper stopped whistling abruptly.
If any one of you look at me again, I will dig out your eyeballs and feed it to you. Do we understand each other?
The monsters bowed down even lower, but no words were spoken from them. No sounds were made or heard. Most of them were even scared to breathe. Death continued his whistling while traveling the path. Then he reached a telephone booth inside a dark, weird-looking building. Death grabbed the receiver of an old winding telephone while humming "This Old Man," then winded back the numbers and waited. A warm, gentle voice had answered from the receiver.
Good day, you're speaking to Avery. Which demon would you like me to exorcise today? Oh, and we also have a sale on possession books.
Miss Avery was a demon, but she was a good demon. The same manner in which angels turned heel towards the human race, Miss Avery turned good. Though her appearance of a slender woman wearing a red dress, which matched the horns that stuck out on either side of her head, and her beady yellow eyes never really helped her case. Miss Avery ran an antique bookshop, the same job she had before she died, while solving possession cases on the side.
Death, it's been a while since I've heard from you, but why use this line? You do know this line is for possession cases only, right?
Yes, ma'am, but I want to know whether I would be able to defeat Leviathan, meaning would my side kill him?
The Beast of Burdock Mountain? Only you and your siblings can see him, but no, you cannot kill him. Your punches won't do damage on him, and vice versa. Literally anyone else could if they were strong enough, but one cannot hit what they cannot see. Conquest designed the beast like that. It would be too easy if you could. Though, there was a rumor about the beast. How true it is yet to be tested. Some say that once contact is made with the monster, its form will appear in front of whoever is making physical contact with it.
And that's what I feared, hence I used this line. This fight isn't something I can base off a rumor. Which brings me to my next question. Would I be able to possess someone?
What? No way. That's not possible. Firstly, the victim will die immediately. Secondly, their soul gets disfigured permanently. And thirdly, heaven nor hell would take them.
Okay, but what if I could possess someone that could heal the damage inflicted upon him?
Holy crap. You found Ragnar.
Avery, would that be possible?
I guess so. But he will not walk out unscathed. He may lose a portion of his memory. Or, worst case scenario, the werewolf would become rabid. You would be locked in there irrespective of how strong you actually are.
Alright, how do I prevent that?
I don't know. This is way above my pay grade. I guess, ask Ragnar to think about his happiest memory before the possession. Also, have a keyword. When you need to exit the body, utter the keyword that would trigger that same happy memory.
Thank you, Avery. I owe you one. Death hung up, then placed the receiver back onto the telephone. He had no doubts the werewolf would be fine on his own. After all, Ragnar the warrior knight worked for towns and villages doing the exact same thing. He knew the White Wolf would find out everything there was to know about the Beast of Burdock Mountain. However, that wasn't the issue. The concern was fighting the beast. The Reaper would have to be Ragnar's eyes throughout the entire fight, and while that may work against an ordinary monster, Leviathan was anything but. One wrong tell from Death and Ragnar could die. However, the White Wolf was also no ordinary warrior. He was the most feared werewolf in both worlds, human and supernatural. The Grum would have to trust that Ragnar would be able to defeat the Beast of Burdock Mountain without him possessing the werewolf. However, if all else fails, Leviathan will certainly be destroyed, but Ragnar might not be the same after possession. Though what the Grum asked of Avery was still handy information nonetheless. Later down the line, there was no way Ragnar was going to defeat war by his lonesome. How could he, when the Reaper himself feared his brother. The White Wolf and Death becoming one was going to happen eventually. Nevertheless, Death spun aside and ended up back in Arkborn. He found a concealed spot in the woods, hiding from any human that might expose his whereabouts to Conquest. The only thing that was left to do was wait for the White Wolf, hoping that he had something to go on. The information received from the villagers of Oxdrift all matched together. They said the beast was invisible, it moved like the wind, it had a deep roar and a menacing growl, and it only showed up at night. That wasn't really much to go on. However, there was an Indian woman named Lenore that came out of one of the houses. She wore a dark blue and black hooded cloak with scars all over her face. Despite her being a witch using similar remedies and ointments like Myra, her wounds were still fresh. Lenore told Ragnar a similar story with one major difference. She claimed to have seen the monster in the flesh. This caused murmurs in the village, since some of them never believed her. They said Lenore was nowhere to be seen in the village last night. The witch then showed a nasty wound from the top of her skull all the way down to her spine. She showed the wound to Ragnar and asked him if any human would cause such a painful scar just to stand out. The warrior knight never comforted Lenore. Witches could be good or bad, but Ragnar stayed far away from witchcraft. But still he listened to her story. Last night when the beast entered Oxdrift, it dragged out villagers from their homes. She said she felt helpless, witnessing the supernatural invisible entity devouring her people. Lenore also claimed that her magic never worked on the beast. She grabbed a spear, then ran towards the monster, swinging blindly. When the monster grabbed her by the neck, Lenore grabbed onto whatever she could. Once physical contact was made, the beast appeared in the flesh. She said the creature was a dark giant with gnarly fangs, blood-red eyes, and antlers on the top of its head. She said there were spikes on the body, but she wasn't sure whether those were horns. Something was really strange about Lenore. Why would the Beast of Burdock Mountain spare her? Not that her story was unbelievable, but her energy just felt off. Ragnar could not quite figure out what it was. Then the dark clouds gathered over the village, looking daunting as ever. The entrance had a wooden gate about 1.5 meters high that began opening itself. While Ragnar couldn't see anything untoward, he felt an ominous presence. He felt this pressure surrounding his body. The aura was a familiar one, this feeling of a fight in which his victory was doubtful. He heard the grunts, growls, and hisses. He heard the ominous roar shaking the homes and rattling the windows in the village. The Beast of Burdock Mountain was in the village of Oxdrift, but Ragnar couldn't see him. Leviathan, larger than ever, walked slowly. His antlers seemed wider and more curved than its usual self. Its eyes were glowing red and drool dripped from its mouth onto the ground, noticed by the warrior knight. Leviathan had its eyes fixed on Ragnar. No matter how or where it walked, its eyes never left the warrior knight. Maybe this was a way of sizing up a formidable opponent. Or maybe the Werewolf and the Reaper approached us the wrong way. Conquest knew his brother better than anyone. He knew that a village with helpless people suffering and facing injustice would be perfect bait. The Werewolf and the Reaper were never hunting Leviathan. Leviathan was hunting them. Ragnar took charge and ushered the village folk inside the church building behind Oxdrift. He knew making them seek refuge in their homes was too risky. Ragnar would rather have them in one place, knowing he wouldn't have to move house to house saving people. However, among the crowd, Lenore was nowhere to be seen. Ragnar asked the villagers if they had any weapons. No, they said, this was always a peaceful community. Never were there weapons laying around. Ragnar closed his eyes and then the church door. He walked towards the middle of the village, unable to see who or what he was fighting. With his right foot, He draws a line on the ground just in front of the church building. Ragnar remained calm. His nerves were easing themselves and his breaths were no more frantic or heavy. He stands strong behind the line, taking his battle stance, ready to fight until his last breath. However, Leviathan was standing right next to him. Death heard a vicious roar echoing from the village, and that wasn't Ragnar. What was the point of now not wanting to be seen when the beast found Ragnar? Death moved like shadowy smoke towards the village with haste. The Reaper knew that if Leviathan was in the village, then Conquest was near. However, what if Conquest had been in the village all along? The Beast of Burdock Mountain scratched a sharp claw against a rock near straw and hay. The spark ignited and the fire spread rapidly, burning down the homes in the village of Oxcroft. Leviathan was strategic in targeting the houses. One might think that a monster of this magnitude, so foul and ferocious, might not be intelligent, rather trained to cause chaos, but not Leviathan. Every flame that ignited drew Ragnar's attention, and that's when the beast attacked him. Moving lightning quick like Fesliyan the vampire cop, with swipes and strikes as strong as Monroe the hellhound. These attacks were coming in from all directions. The warrior knight became a pinball, flying through wooden houses and suffering wounds that were becoming too much to bear. Last time that someone tossed him around like this was the crone, when he was much younger. And still, he crawled his way back behind the line, making sure Leviathan does not enter the church building. Each time the beast took out chunks of Ragnar's chest, right up until the point that he coughed out blood. The antlers pierced Ragnar's stomach as he was suspended in the air, then slammed to the ground. The gashes were getting deeper and the wounds became more painful. The village folk behind Ragnar, hiding in the church building, trembled with fear. Ragnar, however, kept his calm. He kept his eyes closed. He waited for a technique that he gained from his warrior life. A technique that made Ragnar look like a superhuman, when in fact it was years and years of battle experience. Tachypsychia, also known as the time dilation effect or altered time perception, was a psychological phenomenon characterized by the subjective experience of time slowing down or speeding up during highly stressful situations. Whether a foe outranked or outmatched him, Ragnar's heightened senses of knowing when an attack will come before it was even made him a force to be reckoned with. Death reached the village and the folk hiding in the church gasped in horror. They whispered under their breath with fear, all thinking the same thing. Why did he look similar to Conquest? The Reaper saw Leviathan circling Ragnar. Just as he was about to shout out navigational maneuvers, then turn Ragnar back into a werewolf, the warrior stopped him by raising out his hand. He whispered, but Death heard it. He said not yet. For the first time, the Grim Reaper was unsure of what to do. Should he possess Ragnar? But where was the time to explain the process? How could Ragnar possibly find a happy memory in a time like this? More importantly, will the warrior knight even let the Grim Reaper possess him? However, in a shocking turn of events, the battle had taken a drastic turn. The Beast of Burdock Mountain had planned his finishing blow. He planned a deep gash to the neck, slicing the carotid arteries, cutting off blood supply to the brain, face and neck. But when the monster dashed forward, just a few inches away from Ragnar, the warrior with his body facing forward had opened his eyes, reached his hand out towards the side and stopped the beast by grabbing its neck. Ragnar then gave a nod to the Reaper. Once physical contact was made, the Beast of Burdock Mountain began appearing in the flesh. The monster struggled to break the grip. However, as the beast may have gradually changed in appearance, so did Ragnar. The Grum pointed his scythe and uttered an incantation, changing the warrior back into his werewolf form. The monstrous, tall, muscular, giant white wolf with glowing red eyes was now facing the Beast of Burdock Mountain. Ragnar the werewolf had punched the beast so hard it made a hole through its stomach. He then slammed Leviathan to the ground, placing one foot on its chest while ripping out the antlers from its head. Then behind him an army of guards Ragnar fought earlier surrounded Oxdrift. At least 1,000 strong men with heavy weapons stormed the village to seek refuge. Death, however, stood between the army and Ragnar. He intertwined his fingers, then pushed his palms out away from his body. He sighed while stretching, then said, "Now this would be a really good warm-up." The white wolf continued beating up Leviathan, not realizing Death had already killed 500 guards. Ragnar's side eye caught a glimpse of how the Reaper moved. Now whether this was fear or admiration, the werewolf could not deny the Grim Reaper was on a different level altogether. Ragnar then snapped the antlers in half and ripped out the spine of the beast and threw it on the ground, whereas the Reaper sat over the bodies of the guards he had just slaughtered. He looked at Ragnar and said, "What took you so long?" The villagers were cautious to approach the werewolf when they walked out of the church. They saw the wounds inflicted earlier were now healing. Ragnar told them not to be afraid. The Reaper and himself were there to help them. While the white wolf helped the villagers douse the fires with buckets of water, Death could not help but feel an ominous presence lurking nearby. And then, when victory seemed certain, all hell broke loose. Death fell to his knees as Ragnar stood frozen. There was a long blue whip with sharp hooks at the front that wrapped around the Reaper's head. The hooks had pierced his skull and the whip had constantly been tugged on, impaling his head deeper and deeper. Conquest, the youngest rider of the apocalypse, emerged from the shadows holding the other end of the whip in his right arm. Death grunted and tried taking out the hooks from his brain. He wasn't sarcastic or snarky anymore. This time he panicked. He told Ragnar in a grunting voice to get the villagers and himself out of there immediately. In agonizing psychological torture, the Grim clawed at his own face. Then he turned to Ragnar and said,
"If I fall, use the name of my forest, Seraphine. Do not forget that name, Seraphine. Now get the hell out of here."
Conquest stood arrogant, wrapping the whip around his hand for further grip strength. With his long blue and black mysterious hooded cloak and evil pale face, he says,
"Change of plan, brother. Why would I use a werewolf at my disposal when I can have the almighty Death himself? Now, brother, let's dig deep into that childhood of yours and see how much more of a monster I can make you."